You're watching Morning at NTV.
Good morning and welcome to Morning at NTV. Now, Kickstarter this morning, we are talking about something very, very, very important. The financial year 2019-2020 is on our hands, and in a few months, we'll be getting into that. Now, we are going to be talking about the budget framework paper. In regards to that, it's 2019, and also the fact that we are supposed to be hitting our middle income status in 2020. This conversation started in 2016, and who knew that 2020 would get there? But before we can get into 2020, let's talk about the national budgeting process that is on. Now, as it stands, it involves the planning and appropriation of funds in 17 sectors of the government. Of course, when I say 17, a number of you have only heard about like maybe 4 that perhaps they have put their attention to. Please do forgive me. I am Rita Kanya, in case you did not know. And as we get into that, we are going to be talking about that information that is a part of the budget framework paper. Now, I am joined by the one and only Mr. David Walakira. You are most welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in regards to this conversation, we're going to be talking about that. And Mr. David Walakira is a budget policy analyst. And he comes in from, just so that I do not get this wrong, the civil society in regards to
Budget Advocacy Group.
Okay. Yes. Now that, and for a number of people, they could know it as SBAG. SBAG. Yes. Okay. In simple terms. Now we're going to start it off with a conversation of what you make in regards to the financial year budget 2019-2020.
Well, good morning, our viewers, and Happy New Year. The budget for 2019-20 on the onset to us comes with very few, but in terms of many of the sectors you've talked about, non-consequential. The first that everyone has noticed is that the total resource envelope is now 34 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Yes, yeah. But needless to say, of that 34 trillion shillings, we're looking at about 25 trillion that will make actual close to impact between me and the other citizens. Of that 25 also, around 2.7 thereabout is not for spending on anything else other than interest payment for our date that we shall talk about later. So we have about 22 trillion shillings to, so to speak of. So when you compare the current 18-19 resources available for expenditure and the 19-20, the difference is about 50 or so billion shillings. So though the total resource envelope is pushing up from 32 to 34, but the actual money that is coming in for the sectors you've talked about is still about the same. The other underlying significant difference is possibly in the projection for tax revenue is being cracked up by 1.9 trillion to about 18 trillion shillings now. Now that should say a thing or two to me and you and all the businesses and citizens out there. Whereas that is proposed to be the natural growth of the tax revenue, other factors constant, but we suspect there is going to be a few cards from the jacket by government on a few tax proposals here and there that could crank up a few rates.
Oh, we're going to move on from just OTT that we're already up in arms about, mobile money already up in arms about. What could be happen? What could be under their sleeve now?
The common victims or the common targets for our that have got an increment annually without fail has been excess duty on fuel. That has always got at least a 50 shillings crank up on excess duty. We've always seen there's always a touch on things like cooking oil. Alcohol might not survive again. It's always a very good target because it's perceived that those who consume don't have a sense of how much they spend. So if you want, you want. Those are some of but also a few other tax administration measures discussed within to try and remove the inefficiencies, for example, in the VAT collection system. The remittances from those that withhold, that collect VAT on behalf of the government of Uganda, there are huge leakages there within. So those are some of the things that we see could be happening, but the 1.9 trillion won't come through easy as extra resources. Though for half year, 18-19 that we have right now, we are well over about 200 billion shillings from our revenue target from July, November. When the December numbers come in, then we can see what's happening. But so far, we're seeing very good tax collections, both tax and non-tax. That also does say that 1819 still, no, 1920 is still not a shocker. We are spending heavily on road and energy infrastructure. Yeah, so the first candidate up there with over 5 trillion shillings is our works and transport. So there is still no surprise that we've done that for the past 5 to 6 years now, with hope that we're supposed to be getting lots of dividends to the growth. There is a bit of prospect because 17-18 has been projected to has actually grown by 6% against the target of about 5.1. In real terms, per capita terms, that growth is about 3.1%. So because of the population growth, we are a very fertile country.
Quite fertile. Yes.
So that does discount some of the positive growth trends that we do see. On the whole, 1920 still is seeing us, pushing us towards the more discussion of spending what we don't have, hence borrowing. The fiscal deficit as a percent of GDP could be about 5.2%. We have a target though for that in the chart of fiscal responsibility. It's supposed to be 3%, but we're at 5.2. So in terms of what we see for 18-19, we're going to spend a lot more. We're going to borrow a lot more. And we need to brace ourselves for that.
Okay, as we talk about the fact that we're going to spend a lot more, we're going to be able to actually spend and borrow, right? Those are two very important things. But we have our Minister of Finance telling us what we are going. That is what is so. How is that going to happen if we're going like that? Is it actually in regards to what the government is saying and also what we're seeing on ground? Do those two actually come together?
The SWE growth is
I think we should get the SWE award. Really.
I mean, it has to be a SWE. That should get patented. The SWE growth that the minister is talking about does indeed relate to the difference between 16-17, where we got about 3.9%, and 17-18, where we got about 6%. That is indeed a SWE growth.
So we're SWEing. You know? We're SWEing up there.
But again, maybe what he could have overswayed it a bit, because when we factor in other valid variables, like I had said, our population growth, that sweet growth of 6 actually gets down to 3.1. Okay. So the growth is indeed has a positive outlook, but there are risks to it that we definitely need to handle. The debt being one of those critical risks that we need to handle well, in the realm of how, if and when, how do we acquire. What is the cost? What are the terms? How do we execute? Because then the returns on investment won't come if all those variables are not put into perspective. Okay,
now as we put that into perspective in regards to the debt, we had our Minister of Finance, Matia Kasaija, saying something about it this week besides the swing. Take a listen and a look.
I would like to assure this country and all of everybody that our debt is sustainable and is projected to remain sustainable in the medium to the long term. Amabanja tegajja kutuziika nga bwimulira nti gajja kututulaga tuziike. We are very serious people there in the ministry. We watch. Every time a borrowing proposal is brought to me, there are certain things which I must ask that officer, say, show me this, show me this, show me this. When the economy expands, businesses expand, you people, you earn more money, I tax you more. So because I tax you more, I get more money. I don't need to go to borrow. China taking over assets? I don't know. I have heard, but in Uganda I've told you, as long as some of us are still in charge, unless there is a really catastrophe, in which I don't see at all, that will make this economy going behind, I want to assure you people and assure the country, the economy is now on.
Now, I can't be able to whistle and tell you people that the economy is up to what the minister was saying, but definitely I do have David Balakira with me, and I want to just continue to juggle here and tap into his mind in regards to the fact that he's talking about that this will be long-term and not short-term. So do explain, in regards to our budget 2019-2020, where does this leave us long-term?
For purposes of perspective, 1920 is supposed to be the last year for our NDP2. Yeah.
Yes.
We have the National Development Plan too. We've had that planning framework running from 2015-16. Now it's supposed to be ending there.
Yes.
some of the whistling growth that the minister has highlighted has been discounted for 4 straight years. The NDP tells us that if we're to get to the middle income status of lower middle income status of $1,000, about $60 per capita, we're supposed to grow as an economy bare minimum 7%. We've not grown to close to 5% in this whole period, save for 2017-18. So that means that in 18-19 we need to grow at about 12 or 15% to try and add up for the others, and then also for 19-20 we grow at the same rate so that we can actually get to that middle income status. So if you want to look at it in terms of its significance, yes, it's the last year of the NDP too, but also it has a significance of it's the year in which we are not going to reach the middle income status cautiously.
Yes.
What we say about it can be what we want, but the reality of the numbers when you look at it
are not possible.
We are not going to be able to achieve that unless we get more whistling growth projections.
Can we actually see less of the sound and more of actually projections that we see changing? Because as it stands, we see that our government, 19-20, this financial year that is coming through, that our government has decided to take on expenditures, very bulk expenditures in regards to perhaps infrastructure and energy. But one thing that we do see is the lagging in terms of the process. Things like right of way, compensation, and that is delaying the entire thing. So where do we put the fact that yes, we want to go shui, but there are other factors along the way?
Those are indeed operational details that have to be resolved. Like I had said earlier, we need to look at the acquisition of the financing mechanisms for those infrastructure.
Do we have projects. Systems? Could we say as a government we have systems for this?
We do have systems that can use a lot of help.
Okay.
That can use a lot of help. I mean, the Auditor General did say this. Some of the conditions at which we acquire some of these financing facilities give up our sovereignty as a country.
Okay.
To the extent that we are paying for insurance and any other costs that the lenders have in respect to any debt that we're going to acquire with them, and that they can take anything in Uganda. Mark that, anything in Uganda.
Whatever, because we have this.
In respect to the fact that they need to be able to get back their money, whatever, at all cost.
They need it.
Okay, they actually do need it. But then we also look at the other dimension of when the money comes in, do we spend it? We've had projects actually cancelled because of delays.
Where does the money go? Because that's
where
the
does the money
issue.
go? And if and when, depending on where the money comes from, because the loans that we do get range between 30 to 40 years plus. Those are the concessional ones. In the short term, because of the drive to spend, we want to be able to build all the roads we can build in the shortest time. We have an interpretation of the growth drivers to our economy a bit in a stickler kind of way, in a Catholic manner. When we were told that unlocking our infrastructure deficit is going to make us grow, we perceived the prescription of medication of 2 times 1 for a given disease. We are going to shock the disease. Let me talk about the medication now, so that it can be surprised to the extent that I will get healed faster. You could die.
Yes. An overdose.
The extent of what we are doing to ourselves, what we're seeing in the economy, we are overdosing ourselves on the needed but very hastened need for us to close all the infrastructure gaps that have accumulated over decades.
So we should be patient with the process. We can't do everything at once.
We should pace this, and indeed we shall actually get there, but we need to pace this in a very cautious manner, to the extent that yes, the frameworks that are set can be discussed according to the debt management framework. But when the reality sets in, is that we actually cannot afford this. We have agreements that are contradicting. The biggest that we can use as an illustration is the one that we're using for our power right now. We have the people that give us money, the Exim Bank, for Isimba and Karuma, in the agreements, but also in the power purchasing agreement between UETCL and UECGL, is that UETCL is supposed to purchase all the power that is generated. All the power.
All of it.
But then the sales agreement that ERA signs with UETCL is that it will only purchase what has been consumed. I mean, pay for what has been consumed. Not what has been generated. So then now we are going to be, but since this loan is guaranteed by the government of Uganda, we're going to be in a position whereby for that shortfall that comes there within, because definitely we are not going to consume all the power that we're going to generate, but we're going to pay for it either way.
Yeah.
So it's that, how do we get into some of these loan agreements? That's what I said. The content of the agreements at some point becomes so mind-boggling, and then you want to really find out the level of patriotism of the people that discuss them. You also want to see and think, do we do any kind of prior analysis? The feasibility studies are something that is common, but we've also seen that we do acquire debt.
Yes, we do.
That we have not thought through. We actually acquire debt to do feasibility studies.
Okay.
And then you get into the loan, and then you're thinking, okay, no, this is not viable.
But then you come and tell us we're okay.
But you have borrowed the money already. And I mean, we try to sound all these highlights and indicators in the perspective that, yes, there are some positive outcomes in our infrastructure development. I mean, we have a new Entebbe Express Highway. Hello?
Yes, we do.
Besides taking me to the airport faster,
what else?
if we were to actually sequence development projects, I would think now that we're looking for money for oil roads, that money should have been sunk in that region, so that in the event of the returns and hasten the oil production, then our own resources would build that Entebbe Express Highway.
And we're taking on another.
Okay? We are looking for one that is going to take us to Jinja much faster.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, we had just got a new bridge in Jinja.
Now we want another, but all of this.
The discussion is, we need these developments, but where should they go first and then next?
And that takes us to the fact that if we fail to get into and be able to align our priorities and say what will feed and perhaps get the other infrastructure to go, like you just mentioned, if we had focused on oil a while earlier, using the loans that we had gotten, perhaps now the money that had come in from the oil would be able to build the roads. Yes?
With necessarily no debt, with our own resources.
Yes, with our own, as Ugandans would be able to do it. That's what David is saying. But the other thing that you're also mentioning is the fact that the overdose, which I want us to talk about, this overdose that he says that we're taking in with regards to the loans that we're getting, where does it leave us in 2020? Because we'll have 2020 and then 2021, which we know will come with elections.
Yes.
Where does it leave us as a country?
The overdose, of course, does not relate to the threshold that we have of our public, in our public debt management framework that puts the threshold of the net present value of the debt that should be at 50% for us to get worried. The overdose is coming in at the rate, because we grew our debt between June 2017 from 33 trillion to 41 trillion shillings in June 2018. In 1 year, we cranked it up by 22%. So if honestly you're waiting for the corner for you to actually reduce speed, you're going to go through it.
Of course you are.
You won't be able to turn.
You will crash.
That's what we're saying. The overdose is relating, when you look at the specific components of those indicators, the domestic debt.
Yes.
The percentage of the domestic debt that shouldn't be maturing in 1 year at a particular time. We've actually hit that ceiling. It should be 40%. We are now at 41 point something percent.
But then they're telling us we shouldn't be worried.
In total. But when you get into specifics, the percentage of our interest rate payment to our total resources as a country shouldn't go beyond 15%.
But it
17-18 we did 17%. 19-20 we're talking about we are going to do about 16%. This crowds out expenditure that we need for the human capital development and all other social sector spending that we don't need. You see, quality of human capital does supplement the quality of infrastructure.
Yes, that is very true.
In the event that we increasingly see just one item paying interest rates, which is by the number 2 right now in our expenditure priorities, after works and transport, there goes your interest. And then everyone else follows.
Do you think that perhaps at one point interest might become number 1?
It is going to become number 1.
Because I don't
need to be a prophet on that. But also, especially when you look at the totals, it's sometimes really important to look at the total of the picture. And part of the totals that we use to look at in a holistic manner is the fiscal deficit as a percentage of the GDP. It shows us how much we're willing to spend in deficit, how much more we're willing to get to cover up our not having. We have, but we don't have enough. So then we
go again, get some. That means we have to get more to.
For the domestic sense is that we borrow to pay back so that we can borrow again to pay back the borrow.
So that just keeps us in a cycle. Good. We're going to be in a cycle.
That refinancing per se would be acceptable bad manners, but the thing is that figure is growing. The amount that we are refinancing every financial year is actually growing. And we've seen in the World Bank report that was made in November 2018 that we have now actually gotten loans from Standard Chartered. You know what that is? Those are commercial banks, outright. yes, the proportion of our total debt that is commercial is really small.
Yes,
But given the expenditure needs and the growth of the need to spend on expenditure priorities, we are worried that we are going to increasingly be going to the sun. Because what is the risk of going to Standard Chartered? It will give you a repayment holiday of half a year. But what repayment holiday does the World Bank give you? 10 years.
So
and then you pay back in the next 40 years. Standard Chartered will give you a payment holiday of 6 months or 1 year, but you need to pay it back in 6 years. Okay, so that means that indeed the Auditor General did point this out, and it has been making some bit of excitement and anxiety within the Ministry of Finance, that he picked up projects that are going to end by 1920, by actually 2020.
Okay.
And then he said those that he looked at totaled to about 3.9 trillion shillings, that whose tenure was ending in the next 2 financial years. If we finance those loans as projected,
yes,
okay, we are going to spend 65% of our revenue on loan repayment.
Only 65 on just loan repayment.
And you see, that's part of what we made clear. We just wanted to really understand what the Auditor General is trying to say here.
Yes.
He's not saying that we're going to pay back our debt in 1 year.
No, he's not.
He's picked out loans that are going to expire in the next 2 years.
And then let's clear those ones.
Whose tenure is actually getting done, not out of his own wishful thinking, but out of our loan agreements. That, you know, this loan is ending in the next 2 years.
So he was not telling you that we can actually do this in 2 years and let's get it done.
It wasn't a wishful thinking scenario. It was a reality document
as good assessment
of we have 3.9 trillion that is coming due up in the next 2 years.
Yes.
If we had to finance it the way it's supposed to finance it, 65% of our revenue is going to go to that. And then people were saying, no, you see, that's not how we service debt. But then how do you service debt? I thought when the time to pay comes, you pay.
As it has been, any normal person would pay. If they tell you this is the time, you need to pay.
The discussions of we can refinance it, again, are part of the signals of the poor performance of some of these loan portfolios. So, by and large, 1920 is going to be a significant year for us. Not in terms of expenditure to the social sectors, because indeed when we looked at it cumulatively, education, health, agriculture,
agriculture has been
education, health, water and environment, social development, and
you forget the natural disasters that have been 50% has been.
When you look at the totality of all those sectors, their expenditure has been cut by 12%, between 1819 that we're playing now and 1920. Even
if we have things like the Abuja Declaration that perhaps binds us to make sure that we give a particular
they do not want to listen
portion
to any of those.
Anyway, as we go on and we talk now, we have talked about the per capita bit of things, the gross income area where we're going to the budget. But one thing as we look at now 2020, middle income status, looking at things such as economic vulnerability, that is something, and also the human asset income. Now, in regards to the human asset income, we're just going to break it down. If we have realized that the budget on its own, which is the per capita gross income, we're not doing well. Yes, we have a lot of debt. Interests are the highest thing on our budget right now, besides the fact that we've put tourism, industry, and agriculture and infrastructure as the top beat. Now, when you talk about the fact things like education, social development have been pushed back, 12% reduction, which really necessitates that perhaps in terms of health, it's very important. Malnutrition is very important as a country gets to their middle income status. So where would you put our priorities?
We see a very well written budget strategy for 2019-20. We need to give credit to the Minister of Finance for that. The document is very well written.
Beautiful. They took time
beautiful to
figure
read.
It out.
I mean, of course, increase in agriculture production, one can actually now predict what is going to be said, because we all know it. You know, increase in agriculture production and productivity, skills development, tourism, infrastructure development.
And productivity is what we're focusing on.
So the budget strategy per se on where the priorities are, they are very well documented, fortunately for us. And that is a plus that we need to definitely appreciate.
But
the discrepancy comes in at not only allocation but also expenditure. Again, we are seeing so much of the expenditure being pushed into the recurrent side of things, and then the development side, even in terms of the planned projections. We see government, for example, for 17-18, government falling short on its development commitments, but then performing very well on the recurrent side. As a percentage of GDP, our development expenditure is only 0.6%. That of Rwanda is 10%. That of Kenya is around 6 or 7%. So when you're trying to think, but you're borrowing, but why aren't you spending on the capital expenditure? What are you borrowing? No, I'm borrowing from capital expenditure, but there's kind of an expenditure mishap there. Or on the expenditure side of things, there seems to be some kind of mix-up. But when you want to follow through budgets strictly, so then that means human capital development indicators are going to definitely not perform. The most obvious one of poverty has already warned us.
Yes, it has.
It cranked up from 19.4 to now 21, though we are still trying to understand the mode in which that 21 fell down from 27. Because when that first number came out,
it was 27.
It was 27.
Then all of a sudden, 6 was taken off of it to 21, which was a bit scary because...
Maybe someone made an error, maybe someone got a phone call, who knows? But
one of those two could have happened. And as you talk about the fact that perhaps it's something in regards to our expenditure, it also goes back to the fact that we need to be looking at things like inflation. Yes, it is something that perhaps could be the issue. Inflation, the exchange rate ratio and all.
Fortunately for us, some of those macros, especially inflation, has been quite good to us. We've been lucky, and I say the word lucky not because of choice, but because of reality. We do a lot of rain-fed agriculture. Okay, there's interventions that are being cracked up for irrigation, but mostly by and large, we do feed ourselves on rain-fed. So the food price have been kind of stable because of the generally stable rain that we've got. The risks that we've seen with exchange rates, that besides them seemingly stable, we have lost 2.9 trillion shillings in exchange rate conversions to be able to pay loans.
2.9 trillion.
In 2017-18, to be able to pay our loan obligation, because or even, you see, we borrow in foreign currency, but we spend in local currency. So that transition mechanism from the currency in which you borrow to the currency in which you want to spend, the Auditor General tells us that we've lost 2.9 trillion shillings. And that, if you want to scale it up on which sector is that, none. It's just below works and transport for 1920. So no sector is going to get to spend that kind of money. We've lost it due to that foreign exchange risk. So those macros also being looked at, on the whole, they seem good. But when you get into the detail of it, you actually want to understand. You can also want to look at the interest rate at which the private market is borrowing. The Bank of Uganda tells us it has been on average around 19%, but that is a weighted average. When you walk into a banking hall, you'll actually see the reality of interest rate. It's between 30 to 35%, depending on where you go.
Well, we're looking at it from 29.
The interesting bit is that the lower the financial institution, like the microfinance institutions, the more expensive the rate. And then you're thinking, but that's where the SMEs go.
So that's where we need to make it a little
lower.
That's
where it needs to be lower. But when you walk into your traditional banks, the Stanbic, the Standard, the Barclays, depending on what you do or who you are, the rate is different. We've not yet seen the dividend of the so many things the government has done to reduce down the risk of the borrower, including the national ID. So in totality, all of this, as we see government planning on spending for us as a people, first things first, let's pay our taxes. That's critical, because part of how we're going to need to deal with this so-called debt discussion, we need to crank up our own domestic revenues.
But then as we talk about it and as we wind this up, I think we should just be also considering the fact that a number of people say, why should we pay our taxes when we have all this corruption in different places and nothing is being done apart from toll-free lines? But that has been our conversation this morning with Mr. David Bwalakira. He is a budget policy analyst coming in from the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. Thank you so much, David, for joining us on Morning at NTV.
Thank you for having me.
As it stands, very sad news that 2020 we may not actually be able to achieve our middle income status, something that even the Minister of Finances told us. Keep it Morning at NTV. Continue with the hashtag Morning at NTV on Facebook and Twitter. I am Rita Kanya, and we'll be back with your traffic update before we get on to reality on the ground.
You're watching Morning at NTV.